Francie Mackey.
How are you, comrade, good people of North Kerry? It is indeed an honour to be invited here tonight to honour a man who gave his life to serve his country, and for making that commitment he was murdered by the Black and Tans. It is indeed very fitting that you, the people of North Kerry, hold dear the sacrifice of Lieutenant Eddie Cormody, and indeed all who served with him in the IRA in that period and the decades that followed, and that their sacrifices will never be forgotten. When Eddie Cormody came to Ballylongford, a young man, to work on a local farm, he was a typical young fella. History records that he was an outstanding Gaelic footballer and an all-round athlete. He was a man of courage, honesty and integrity. He was one of the first to join the IRA, being quartermaster of his company and quickly moving to the rank of lieutenant. His murder and savage torture and beatings brought not only a sense of sadness to this area, but equally strengthened the resolve of the people to end British interference in Irish affairs. Kerry is renowned for its proud republican tradition, and we thank you for taking that principled position. History records Eddie Cormody's exploits in defending a fish when British troops deemed it to be illegal. The IRA created a diversion, surrounded them and detained them until the fish was on their way. They were later released, and this must have been really humiliating for British forces in Ireland. This was community involvement at its best, and demonstrates how the proud people of this area stood up to British rule in Ireland. The people of Ireland had spoken 2 years prior to the murder of Eddie Cormody in 1918, and in 1919 the first Dáil had declared Ireland's independence. The British refused, as we know, to accept the democratic will of the Irish people, and through the threat of force imposed partition. The sovereignty of the Irish nation was violated, and people like Eddie Cormody fought in defence of their country's sovereignty and in defence of our independence. Today, following many illegal attempts to legalise British rule in Ireland, with the latest treaty being pushed through in 1998, Republicans have again to pick up the pieces of betrayal. Volunteer Eddie Cormody epitomises the legality of the Republican position back then, when Irish national sovereignty was established, violated by a foreign occupying force, and that remains the position to this very day. There is no other issue for Irish Republicans to pursue. The continued refusal by the British government to recognise the sovereignty of the Irish people and to maintain by force, if necessary, their illegal claim in the occupied 6 counties is indeed an inevitable source of conflict. Today, sadly, British rule in Ireland is fostered by those who administer it in Stormont, assisted in this part of the partitioned Ireland by those in Leinster House. The 32 county sovereignty movement rightly moved prior to the illegal referendum in '98 and lodged a challenge under international law. This in effect renders the '98 treaty null and void in the absence of an outcome to that challenge. The British government has no rights in Ireland. Their claim is illegal. And today, young men and women like Eddie Carmody refuse to be downtrodden under British rule and oppose such infringements on our national rights. Our actions is to address the core cause of conflict and find a resolution befitting a lasting tribute to Eddie Carmody, a fitting tribute to all who give their lives for Irish freedom. Today, given the divisions or perceived divisions that exist across the Republican base, it is important to note that standing together we are strong, divided we will fall. Republicans need unity of purpose based on democratic decision making to ensure that never again will Republicans blindly follow populism at the expense of principle. It can only take us back to the 1998 position. The 32 County Sovereignty Movement is the only organisation with a sound analysis and a principled position in challenging the violation of our national sovereignty as outlined in the 1916 proclamation, ratified by the people of Ireland, resulting in our declaration of independence. That is our position. Our independence and freedom was declared, and as I said earlier, the British government refused to accept the democratic will of the Irish people, and through the threat of force imposed partition. Our rights were violated and remain so. No amount of border polls based on the illegal interference by a foreign parliament can give legitimacy to Stormont, Westminster or Leinster House. The only poll or referendum the Irish people need is a post-British one based on how our proud nation is governed. Today, in the occupied 6 counties, the British government, assisted by British policing in Ireland and sanctioned by those in Stormont, are involved in the criminalisation of Irish Republicans in an attempt to normalise British occupation. Internment by remand is a weapon used against the Irish people who oppose British rule. Today, in McGabry Jail, for example, Gerard McManus from Letterkenny is 4 years on remand. Martin Corey, 3 years interned on licence. D.D. McLaughlin on remand, licence revoked. Brenton McConville and John Paul Wooden, known as the Craigavon 2, 3 years imprisoned. Miscarriage of justice. Colin Duffy, 2 years imprisoned, acquittal at trial. Brian Shivers, imprisoned for life, conviction overturned. Marion Price, 2 years, interned on licence. Add to all of that contrived charges and the use of covert intelligence, and we see a very deliberate British systematic targeting of individuals to remove Irishmen from their freedom and to use such abuse of their rights, resulting in their internment. The abuse today is more subtle, but nonetheless abuse, similar to the abuse Eddie Carmody suffered when shot and wounded and before they put the last bullet in his head. Do farmer comrades really expect Republicans to lie down and take this systematic abuse because we uphold the sovereignty of our proud nation, just as volunteer Eddie Carmody did in 1920? I want to remind you that we're now coming up to Christmas, and as you would know, December is Prisoner Month. The IRPWA, a separate group but integral Republican organisation in that it looks after the welfare of POWs to ensure that they're not left wanting and that their families are not neglected. I asked you gathered here tonight to ensure that when you go home you set about setting up structures which reflect our sovereign position and get people organised to raise the much needed finance for the IRPWA to ensure that the prisoners' needs are met. In conclusion, I would like to thank you, the people of North Kerry, for not allowing the sacrifice of Eddie Carmody to be forgotten. I ask that you increase your efforts by joining with us in our challenge against the violation of Irish national sovereignty. Join the Republican movement to end British rule in Ireland, and join with us to ensure that a fitting tribute to Lieutenant Eddie Carmody will be realised with the establishment of our freedom in an independent, sovereign Ireland. Bear Bua.